Hello and welcome. Today, I'll show you the book that I'm using for these Roman history lectures. It's called Pax Romana by Adrian Goldsworthy, right there. And it's a broad, sweeping coverage, but it gets right to the meat of all these issues, and he's a really great history writer. I'm really impressed by it. I didn't know anything about Roman history before I read it, but now I feel like I'm an expert just by skimming through and reading the important parts of this book. But he has a quote from this book for today's talk. Today's talk will be Rome governing, Roman governance, or Rome governing, whatever you want to call it, right? The quote that I'll have is a quote from Cato to Cicero in April of 50 BC. He says, and it's about Roman governance and about the governors that Rome had, the provinces and the governors that Rome had, the administration of the state over a peaceful province or over a province. This is what Cato had to say to Cicero, and Cicero was a consul, I believe, a consul that became a proconsul. Proconsul is a retired consul that becomes a governor, and a proconsul is like a governor, basically. So, as Cato said to Cicero, the Senate's judgment that a province has been held and preserved by its governor's mild and upright administration, rather than by the swords of an army or the favor of the gods, is a far greater distinction than a triumph. A triumph being when the Romans killed 5,000 enemies on the battlefield. He's saying here that the mild and upright administration of a governor is far greater than the distinction of a triumph. So it's much better to rule a province with peace, mild and upright administration, good governance, than it is to put down 5,000 enemies with the sword, right? Although these triumphs were celebrated in Rome, they had monuments and they gave the victor all these rewards. It's actually much better. The Senate actually decided, as Cato said to Cicero, that a peaceful governor was much more valuable to Rome than anything else, right? So the thesis here, Rome governing. Holding the peace and governing provinces well was the most valuable asset to Roman rule. Proconsuls, former consuls, remember consul is an elected executive that served for 1 year. 2 consuls served at the same time, each for a year, and they served out their time in Rome. When they were consul, they would be serving the executive from the city of Rome itself. But proconsuls, former consuls, such as Cicero in Cilicia. Cilicia is modern-day Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. Cilicia, as they called it, the province of Cilicia. Cicero in Cilicia governed provinces and commanded garrisons, legions in garrison at there. An honest and truthful governor kept stability and enabled the publicani. The publicani, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but publicani were the merchants or the Roman businessmen that would collect taxes for Rome. The publicani, a truthful, upright, stable governor, enabled the publicani to collect taxes. No bloodshed was the critical value to Rome. Peace and order and stability. So we read you that quote. The first point here is that the governor usually did not have a permanent villa, but traveled around in a roofed carriage or by horse or by foot even. Governors were known, I think they said when they're traveling to the province, they traveled with a staff of 12 officers to serve as footmen and doormen and horse and carriage men. But when they're traveling around the province, they didn't move with a big army. They just moved in a carriage with a retinue. You know what a retinue is? A retinue is a group of people that serves your court and your protectors and your security staff, basically. The governor would travel with a retinue around the province, and they didn't have a permanent. I didn't know this, but they didn't have a permanent villa to rule from in the provinces. They actually had to travel to the places where they were supposed to administer their state, administer their rule. So they'd constantly be traveling around the provinces in a circuit sort of thing, going through the cities of the province. And they also commanded the legions in the province, so the legions would be stationed wherever. It's actually a funny story that actually a lot of the cities in Asia Minor, in Cilicia, in Turkey, ancient Turkey, and when the Romans ruled it, I think it was mainly a Greek settlement with other ethnicities there, but I think Greek and Roman. The cities in Cilicia would actually pay taxes, or you could call it extortion, to the Romans just to not have the army stationed in their city. They didn't want the Roman soldiers stationed in their city because Roman soldiers would get rowdy, they'd get drunk, and they'd cruise and peruse through the city. And so the cities actually paid the governor, says, please keep your army out of our city so that we can conduct our city life in private and business. So that's just an aside. But so what was the first point? Sorry, I lost my track here. The governor usually did not. So the governor is traveling around all the time, all around the province, and you can imagine that and they had these covered carriages. These actually very established carriages that were very advanced for the time, and it even said that up until the 1700s, the carriages of the Roman Empire were actually just as good as the carriages of modern day Europe, right? Covered carriages, so there's offered protection, and in these carriages they could dictate, and they could write and study and read and study notes and study documents for their administration of their governorship. But they traveled around. Sometimes they'd be on horseback, but it was a pain in the ass, literally a pain in the ass to sit on a horse for many, many hours. So carriages were often a preferred mode of travel. But sometimes they'd even be on foot. They'd walk into a city. They wouldn't travel on a chariot because a chariot involves standing up. You had to stand up in a chariot. But when they're coming into a big city, major city, they might get onto a chariot just before they arrived in the city so that they had a magnanimous entrance. But the governors would travel around and administer the state by traveling. Point 2, they commanded the legions, but this was a staying power, not an occupation army. So an occupation army is when you have a huge standing army occupying a territory because there's a military threat in that territory, or a threat of rebellion in that territory, But most of the provinces did not have a huge occupation army, but they had a garrison, Let's call it a garrison. I think that's the correct term for it, which would be the minimum number of troops that you needed to defend to keep peace in a province and administer policing. I don't know if they did policing or not, but they would fight off bandits and fight off checks of Roman power. And it's a good quote, actually. I think it's in this book I read, that Rome, when Rome was in the zenith, you know what a zenith is? A zenith is a peak of an empire is a zenith. When Rome was in the zenith of its power, the legionaries were stationed all around the perimeter of Rome, the Roman Empire, to keep the barbarians at the gates, sort of thing, and to keep the barbarians away from the gates, I should say. And I think there's a quote here from one of the ancient Romans might have said this. They said the legionaries were like a big wall around the Roman Empire, and it was peace and order in the center. So the perimeter of the Roman Empire up into Gaul and the border with Germany, up into northern England with the border with the Britons and the tribes in Scotland, in the Middle East with Israel, and Egypt and North Africa, and Greece with Thracia up in northern Greece and past Macedonia. The Romans, the legionaries, acted as a big wall around the perimeter of the Roman Empire to protect the empire itself, and inside the empire was order and stability. Here today we're talking about what the order and stability looks like, and we will talk about what citizenship looks like, but today just the peace and order and governance. So he commanded the legions, but these were a staying power. If they were on a border town, the legion, the legions that he commanded, if they were in a border with Rome and then on the edge of the empire, it might be more strength there. But if it was in the middle of the Roman Empire, in the center of the Roman Empire, in Greece or in Cilicia, Asia Minor, it wouldn't be an occupation army; it would be a garrison. Point three. This office, governor, was a reward to well-standing Roman politicians, usually former consuls, and they became then proconsuls, sometimes former praetors. So with the structure of the Roman state, the members 2 consuls serving 1-year terms, and they're like the presidents of the state of the U.S. Only it's the president of Rome, and they administer the military and they administer the Roman governance from Rome for that 1 year, and then they have to leave office after a year. But after they left office, they'd often be cycled as a reward for their service. They'd often be given a governorship, which is supposed to be like a comfortable living that keeps you busy, that keeps you active, that you're trusted a politician in Rome, you're trusted by the Senate, you're trusted by the Senate or the emperor, whatever it may be, and you can serve the Roman Republic well. So this was usually a reward for these governors to be a proconsul, to be a governor. Sometimes praetors, it says in the book, sometimes praetors, remember, were the magistrates below the consuls that had they still commanded the military, and they were responsible when the consul was away. But the praetors were lower magistrates, and sometimes they'd be given not governorships, but command over settlements and command over certain territories. But just know it's a reward, and basically you want to keep the human, like we discussed earlier, you want to keep the human capital, you want to keep the stable minds, the seasoned military men, the seasoned administrators, seasoned in statecraft. You want to keep them active and on the services to the republic, right? Point 4. This gets into the merchant class. The publicani, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's called publicani, Publicani. Publicani. Roman businessmen bought up large this is how they administered taxes, by the way. The publicani, the Roman businessmen, bought up large contracts to collect taxes in the provinces. They were very wealthy and had large lobbying power in Rome and Roman politics, like an interest group. So these businessmen, they were like the merchants of Rome. They were merchants of Rome, and they'd have many millions of equivalent Roman currency, where they'd buy up these rights. They'd actually buy the rights to collect taxes. They'd travel to the province. They'd work alongside the governor, and they'd have a private contract to collect taxes on behalf of Rome. I think they collected taxes mainly on imports and exports, riverways, canals, so they could actually keep track of goods that were coming through, and other things. I'm not sure the full extent of what they taxed. But they had a contract to collect taxes, and governors and Roman politicians were very afraid of them because they had a lot of money to lobby the Roman Senate and to lobby the Roman government. Right? Sounds a lot like today. It's funny that politics happens through history and it's still happening today. There's still wealthy businessmen that lobby the government, and we call them interest groups, right? And the publicani, in some certain respects, when Rome captured Spain, the publicani lobbied to have mining rights in Spain so they could collect the silver out of the mines in Spain. They purchased contracts to collect the mines in Spain. They purchased contracts to collect the taxes. So if you think about it, it's then a private contract to collect taxes, unlike our institutions now where there's public government entities like the IRS or Canada Revenue Agency or IRS in the States to collect taxes. Or Internal Revenue Agency. But back then, the government needed these men, their competency to collect taxes, and so they'd purchase the rights. And then I believe the Romans likely had to enforce their right to collect taxes in the provinces. So that's it for today. That's just a simple lecture, just kind of boring but kind of mundane. But this is the reality. Like I said in the opening quote, this is more important than bloodshed, more important than, it's not as sexy as conquest or as thrilling as conquest or violence or military prowess, but it is the reality of the rule of the Roman Empire. Most of the mainstay of the Roman Empire was these proconsuls, these governors administering provinces peacefully. There was always cases of embezzlement and mismanagement, and sometimes the governor mismanaged it so poorly that there's open rebellion against him. But when you have a governor like Cicero who didn't even want to be a governor, maybe he reluctantly became a governor, you had truthful, honest, upright men. The Senate really liked that. The Roman Republic really liked that. The Romans really liked that. And it was the mainstay of their governance and their staying power. So with this, leave you my peace to give you. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.